final jolt came so suddenly that I didn't have time to react, only to feel my entire body being thrown from the seat and slamming hard into the cockpit wall. Every warning system screamed at once, as if the ship itself was dying. The auxiliary control panel had already shorted out. The left hull was pierced by a Class 6 nanometeorite, and the stabilization core had flipped like something had bent it from within. I had no other option but to plunge toward the nearest planet, a temporary waypoint without an official name, marked only as Elythar 3. The biological data was practically non-existent. A planet neither friendly nor properly explored. And now, it was the only place I could crash, if I still wanted to live. The ship tore through the atmosphere in a blazing streak. The exterior burned white-hot, the plasma shield cracked open like an eggshell. As the vessel skidded through a massive fissure carved into a valley eroded by centuries of magnetic storms, I wasn't sure if I was about to land, or just crash and survive by sheer luck. The sand beneath was tinted a pale violet, with streaks of silver. It seemed faintly magnetic, glowing faintly beneath the cold blue light of the planet's third sun. The wind across Elythar's surface didn't whistle. It clashed with itself, a sound like metal scraping on metal, like the grinding teeth of a universe watching me invade something it had long since cast aside. When I finally got the hatch open, a blast of frigid air hit my face, and my chest clenched tight, as if something inside was squeezing it with invisible hands. There was no obvious toxin, no anesthetic gas, but the sensation, the sharp, sweet tang in the air, the syrup-thick consistency as if I was breathing through liquid, told me clearly I was stepping into a biosphere not made for humans. I suited up, grabbed the electro rifle and my sensor unit. Every step felt heavy, not just because the gravity here was 12% stronger than Earth's, but because my instincts were screaming at me. I wasn't alone. Not far from the crash site, I spotted a rock formation hidden in a crevice between two ridges. Its edges had been worn into strange spirals by the wind. Inside, the scanner picked up a slight heat signature, a patch of uneven warmth. I stepped in. My eyes took a moment to adjust to the dimness, and then I saw her. She stood there, in absolute silence, and naked. No armor, no weapon, no language, just a being. Humanoid, yet unmistakably hybridized with some ancient exoskeletal creature. But so beautiful my mind couldn't define it. Her skin shimmered like it had been forged from living metal, pale bronze reflecting the ambient biolight. Her eyes had no pupils, just two mirrored quartz-like lenses so deep I thought I could see my own trembling reflection inside them. Her lower body was encased in segmented armor, flexible joints that moved like a serpent's skin, flowing with a grace no machine could replicate. Her walk wasn't heavy, not mechanical. It was as if her body had been designed to drift weightlessly through three-dimensional space. I raised my weapon instinctively. She didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't react. We stood there, just meters apart, and time stopped. 1 second. 2. Then she sprang. Faster than a compressed biological coil, she launched forward. Her curled tail swung around from behind, wrapped around my arm, locked the elbow joint, and slammed me backward into the cold violet sand. The weapon flew from my hand. My head hit stone, but didn't bleed. I opened my mouth to shout, but she was already on top of me. She didn't kill me, didn't stab, didn't bite, didn't scream like a predator. Instead, she lowered her face close, nose pressed to my neck, inhaling. Sniffing, studying, I felt her chest press into mine. Her skin was hot, radiating heat. That metallic skin emitted warmth through my suit like she was a walking biological reactor. My breath caught, partly from fear, but partly because something in me was responding. I didn't want to admit it, but my lower abdomen had reacted, and she knew. Her hand, 5 fingers shaped like a human's, slid down to my hip. I flinched, but she didn't grab or search for a weapon. She simply pressed her palm to my lower belly and paused. Then, a whisper, barely audible, like wind slipping through a torn ozone layer. compatible. Right after that, she slid her body over mine, not like a beast pouncing, but slowly, like a ritual, like a signal. Her body lowered gently onto mine, not with weight, but enough friction to feel every part of what she was. Her hardened undercarriage felt smooth as jade stone, and her chest, pressing into me, was so soft it felt engineered to overwhelm human resistance. I tried to resist, but not with violence, with reason. Reason didn't last long, because she began to moan. The sound, not human but deeply primal, stirred something buried in my spine, a low frequency, resonating through bone and marrow. And I understood, she wasn't sounding an alarm, she was emitting a mating signal. And when she leaned close to my ear, I heard it clearly this time, not wind, not distortion. Mating, day one. I couldn't speak. I was no longer the one in control of this encounter. I was still lying motionless on the purple sand of Elythar 3, feeling my skin tingling as if a wave of plasma had just passed through it, without leaving any physical trace. But on the surface of my body, there remained a faint silver sheen she had left behind. It was like an invisible mark, neither sticky nor slick, but when I reached up to touch it, it dissolved instantly into my skin faster than any enzyme I'd ever known. It had no scent, no residue, but it made me shiver, for its very existence felt utterly unnatural. My heartbeat was faster than normal, not from fear, but from a strange form of arousal spreading within me, something that awakened my entire nervous system all at once without warning. In front of me, she or it sat down, her hands resting on her thighs. Her body folded gracefully, like a being born to choreograph every movement with elegance. The pale blue light from the thin upper atmosphere reflected off the armored plates beneath her abdomen, creating streaks of liquid-like shimmer, smooth enough to blur the boundary between flesh and biological armor. There were no chains, no restraints, no physical mechanism to hold me back, and yet I knew I couldn't leave. Partly because I didn't yet understand what I was dealing with, and partly because I no longer wanted to leave. Even though I was trained to remain in control under any circumstance, I knew then my reflexes had already betrayed my reasoning. She had made me forget who I was. She said nothing for the first few minutes, but when I began to shift upright, she placed her hand on my chest, gently, firmly, and then a pulse entered my body. It wasn't electricity. It wasn't radiation. It was a kind of ultra-low frequency resonance wave, like a neural frequency operating at the atomic level. In that moment, I felt my consciousness slip into a hazy state, not unconscious, but wrapped in a veil so thin it made language feel obsolete. Then her voice echoed, not from her lips but from inside my skull. I am Zheraya, the last hybrid of the Elythar Scorpith line. My mating cycle lasts 7 days. Day 1 has begun. My body requires compatible contact to thermoregulate. Without it, I die. And you are compatible. I shot upright as if struck by lightning, my whole body tense. Wait, what did you just say? Mating? Thermoregulate? You mean, but I didn't get the chance to finish. Her lips pressed against mine. No permission, no hesitation. And I knew immediately this wasn't a kiss. Not the kind humans give, not soft, not nervous. What she delivered through that kiss was something else entirely, like lava pouring backward through my nervous system. Burning, searing, but also euphorically electrifying. A type of enzyme soaked into the mucosal lining of my mouth, mingling with my tongue, triggering my adrenal glands and hypothalamus, as if someone were rewriting my hormonal programming from within. She ran a finger slowly along my neck, deliberate but fluid, down across my chest, over my ribs, stopping at my waist. I didn't know when I had started panting. I just knew that each touch from her was rewriting the very map of my senses. Her eyes were still as pupilless and emotionless as any gene hybrids, but in that silvery glint, I saw something words couldn't convey, a hunger repressed for too long. She didn't merely desire, she needed me like a living cooling system, a mechanism for survival. Day 1 requires only thermal exchange initiation, she said softly. I won't harm you, But I will use you. I swallowed hard. The feeling was a swirl of helplessness, curiosity, and submission. Part of me wanted to pull away, set boundaries, ask questions. But the other part, the part that was steadily hardening inside my suit, just wanted to know where this would lead. When she pulled up my shirt, her hand was no longer cool. It was hot, not like a feverish human hand, but like the surface of a miniature plasma core in full operation. Her breath hit my lower abdomen, and the air around me felt thick. Her body scent, a strange, sweet metallic pheromone, made it hard to breathe. Not from lack of oxygen, but from too many reactions happening at once in my sensory system. She slid a finger along the growing bulge in my suit, tracing the erection beneath the fabric, then paused and squeezed, just enough to send a clear message. I know you're responding. And then she whispered, "You're responding. Good. The less time needed for initiation, the safer it is for me." I gasped, my head spinning. "This isn't because I want it. You're making it happen." She leaned in closer, her breath brushing my lips, her voice a hushed promise. "I know, but if instinct makes you satisfied, eventually, emotion will follow." And when her hand slipped inside the fabric, I didn't stop her. I don't remember how long it lasted. Only that afterward, I lay there, nerves numb, heart racing as if I'd just sprinted through a mountain range. My muscles limp, my skin damp, but not cold. On the contrary, I felt as though I had just survived some kind of biological fever. My body felt lighter, my brain sharper, and most disturbingly, I missed her the moment she stepped away. Zheraya didn't lie down to rest. She stood, her body glowing faintly, not with artificial luminescence but with the soft biolight of a stabilized endocrine cycle. Her metallic skin looked soothed, as if she had just drawn something from me that restored her balance. She didn't look back. She simply stated, like a clinical report, "Day 1 is complete. My temperature has dropped by 2.1 units. We have 6 days left." I lay there, staring up into the Elythar sky, the second moon rising on the horizon, pale blue and cold. And all I could think was, holy shit, what the hell have I gotten myself into? The cave we took shelter in lay nestled between jagged ridges, charcoal-gray cliffs scarred by centuries of ion wind erosion. Grooves etched by time ran like massive wounds across Elythar 3's flesh. Not a single weed, not a trace of life. Just scorched soil, dead stone, and a wind that howled through the rock like a haunted breath from a planet that had forgotten it once carried life. I set up the survival tent, activated the insulation shield and pressure control. But Zheraya refused to come in, not because she didn't understand, but because she didn't need to. She didn't need temperature regulation, didn't need oxygen, didn't need rest or energy like a typical biological organism. Every survival mechanism she had was focused on one thing only, her mating cycle. And to keep going, all she needed was me. She didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't speak. But every few hours her body would begin to glow with heat, not from the environment, nor from a basic metabolic exchange. It was the product of an internal hormonal storm, a biochemical cascade she couldn't reverse once it began. And I, despite being an intruder, was accidentally the only compatible vessel to ease that storm. A living radiator, but not just biologically. My body had become a place of balance, a medium for reception, a means to fuse with her fading existence. She didn't scream, didn't demand. But every time she drew close, her skin would start to glow faintly, dim, pulsing to the rhythm of her heartbeat, as if there were a tiny sun pulsing inside her chest. In those moments, she didn't look at me with lust. She simply approached, wrapped around me like a wave of pure instinct, a biological tide with no language, no preamble, just contact. The second time, she didn't pin me down like before. Instead, she ran her hand gently down my spine, her crescent-shaped tail gliding along my vertebrae, its hooked tip grazing each bone like she was playing a song that had never been written. She moaned softly, not out of arousal, but as if releasing a burden. Her mouth touched my neck. Not just a kiss, but a biochemical transfer. A subtle enzyme beneath her skin numbed my nerves, designed to turn pain into pleasure, to make every touch a spark, igniting the primal fire beneath my logic. She didn't ask for consent, because here the human idea of consent didn't apply the same way. Survival came first, and she was fighting to stay alive. But because of that, I didn't feel violated. I didn't feel disgusted. I felt needed, wanted, and terrifyingly, I wanted to be needed that way. We moved together like two halves long separated by a gene-deep explosion, reunited now to complete the final sequence. There were no words, only breath, mingling with the howling wind outside, only rising body heat, sweat trickling down my brow and her chest glowing brighter. Each measured motion was a heartbeat of a species not mine, yet in sync with mine, second by second. And in the silent spaces between waves of pleasure, I felt it, the despair behind her control. She wasn't taking pleasure in me out of want. She was doing it because she had no other choice. Day 2. I didn't know exactly when it began, only that when I awoke she was there, sitting with her back to me. No longer glowing, trembling slightly as if something inside her was tearing her apart. And me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked at her, not as a stranger using me for survival, but as a being fighting not to fall apart. I stood up, approached. She lifted her head slightly, her eyes asking what her voice didn't. This time, is it for me or for you? I didn't answer. I just lay down beside her and pulled her into my arms. And when her body began to melt into mine again, I realized I wasn't being used anymore. I was choosing. For the first time, I wasn't making love like a victim. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply holding her, because I didn't want to let go of something I might never find again. It felt different this time. As we fused again, I didn't feel led. I led. She breathed harder but didn't moan. Her eyes locked onto mine, unblinking as if trying to learn how to trust. For the first time, I kissed her not out of biology. I kissed to comfort. And she, for the first time, kissed me back as someone trying to learn how to love. We lay together for a long time afterward, not speaking, just breathing, listening to the wind slide through the mountain pass like Elythar 3 itself, whispering, holding every intimate secret we shared in its silence. I looked at her. The glow in her eyes had softened, and I asked one simple question. Are there others of your kind still alive? She didn't answer right away. She brushed dust from my shoulder, as if the question had settled there, then finally replied, her voice raspier than ever. No, I'm the last, and if I don't reproduce during this cycle, the hybrid gene line will go extinct. My body froze, not because I feared she was trying to use me as a breeding tool, but because I felt the sheer weight of her loneliness. What she carried inside her wasn't just one life. It was the final punctuation mark in a timeline evolution had already abandoned. I asked, out of reflex more than reason, "Are you trying to have a child with me?" Zheraya tilted her head, her gaze narrowing, as if surprised that I hadn't understood earlier. No. Fertilization only occurs if the cycle completes and there's emotional consent. We do not force life, we only try to survive. And it was that sentence that changed everything. I no longer saw her as a creature. I saw her as a girl. A hybrid being, yes, but one that still upheld a delicate boundary between instinct and choice. Even while her biology urged her to spread her genes, she had kept her will. And in that moment, I realized I had crossed a threshold, where sex wasn't an animal reaction anymore, but a way to touch someone's soul. That night, she didn't come to me. She lay a few meters away, her biolight still there, but dimmer. She trembled, not from cold, but because she was battling herself. I stared at her for a long time, then stood, and walked to her without hesitation. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. I held her the way one holds something fragile. The way you hold a thing you're afraid to lose if you wait even a second longer. And when I entered her for the third time, this time I whispered, "Not just for cooling, I want to feel you." and Zheraya for the first time responded with a real kiss. No enzymes, no triggers, no biology, just lips, learning how to love like a human. I woke up in the middle of the night. Not because of any sound, not because of a sudden light, but because of something unmistakable: absence. The familiar weight on my arm was gone. The gentle warmth that usually lingered where her thigh rested was no longer there. No steady breathing, no soft glow from her skin reflected off the climate shelter walls. My instincts screamed. She had left her spot. I stepped out of the tent, my legs still heavy from the last biological heat exchange, haunting and intoxicating. The night air was as cold as plasma ice, yet so dry it felt like every moisture molecule had been vacuumed out by ion winds. And then, I saw her. Zheraya was kneeling alone on the rocky ground, her fingers gripping the rough wall. She wasn't making any sudden movements, but the tremble of her fingers sent a wave straight through my chest. Her body was glowing, not with the pulsing brightness of arousal or high temperature like before, but flickering, like a dying light bulb. I approached slowly. "Are you okay?" She didn't turn around. Her voice was low and rough, not cold but broken like glass cracking from the inside. "I made a mistake." I sat beside her. I didn't ask anything. I just waited. "I shouldn't have let you stay," she said. "I shouldn't have let you touch me, like that." I placed my hand over hers. Her skin was drier than usual, no longer warm, no longer smooth. It had a faint grain, a clear sign that her inner system was in disarray. "You needed me to cool down," I said softly. "That wasn't your fault." She turned to look at me. For the first time, I saw her eyes, not pupils, not irises, but shimmering like entire galaxies contained within. Not tears, her body didn't have tear ducts, but that light, it flickered with emotions she didn't understand. "The heat has passed," she said, "but I still want to touch you, and that's the problem." I didn't reply immediately. I looked at my own hand, still faintly marked by her nails, and I understood. At some point, her touch had stopped being a burden. At some point, I had started reaching for her in my sleep, seeking her breath like a newly formed instinct, not from biology, but from emotion. We lay down again beneath the semi-transparent tent roof. The Elythar 3 sky glowed in pale violet, like a halo of death, beautiful and distant. Outside, the wind howled endlessly, like the wails of 1,000 forsaken souls. But in her arms, I heard nothing but my heartbeat. I looked at her for a long time. She looked at me too. Her eyes were no longer emotionless silver mirrors. They reflected me, as if she was seeing herself through someone else's gaze for the first time. "Zheraya," I whispered, "this, between us, could it become something more?" She hesitated. "You're asking if you could love me?" I nodded. Not because I was sure, but because I wanted to know if it was even possible. She didn't answer with words. She leaned in and kissed my shoulder, my chest, my stomach, each spot like a checkpoint on a map of emotion, redrawing the line between our once separate worlds. I felt no enzyme, no hormones, only warmth. A gentleness from a being who had never known gentleness. "If I have one last mating season to live," she whispered, "I want it to bear your name." I kissed her. Not urgently, not with fire. Just a light touch, as if pressing any harder would shatter the moment. That night we didn't make love like before. No more hunger, no more primal urges to offload heat. We loved each other. We touched like two who had learned to listen. Every caress was a request, every soft moan was a confession, and every silent pause between breaths was a song without words that I had long dreamed of hearing out in the stars, where nothing else remained but two beings still capable of feeling. I remember. She held me from behind as we slept. Her tail curled around my waist, not like a shackle anymore. It was warm, soft, and matched my breathing, like a tiny biological cocoon I never wanted to leave. I knew that if anyone else saw us, they'd see me wrapped in the grasp of a dangerous alien, a creature that could sever my spine with one flick of her tail. But here, she was protecting me. And for the first time I understood. Some things didn't need words. Some feelings weren't born from species, but from silent choices. I fell asleep in her arms like a child, and for the first time on this alien world, I felt like I was home. That morning, I woke up alone. The first moment was disturbingly empty. No familiar weight curled against me, no soft warmth where her body had always rested. No shimmering light reflecting off the climate shelter from her skin, no slow and steady breath by my ear like the night before. I shot upright, calling her name unconsciously, but only the cold echo bouncing off the rock walls answered me. The shelter was intact. My protective suit lay where I had left it. No signs of a struggle, no blood. She had simply vanished. I rushed outside, my feet sinking into sand as cold as frozen nitro, each grain seeming to carry a negative charge that jolted through my knees with every step, like Elythar 3 itself was trying to hold me back. The wind blew as it always did, howling in its usual rhythm, like metal scraping against metal. But today, that sound wasn't what scared me. It was the silence of a world with nothing left to lose. I found her after a few frantic minutes of running through the rugged terrain. She was kneeling beside a massive stone outcrop, about 200 meters from our shelter, at a spot where the cliff face had been torn open like a giant open wound. In front of her was a circle carved into the rock by hand, filled with strange biological symbols. Spirals, serrated lines, and overlapping double crosses like three-dimensional gene structures. At the center of the circle, she had placed a small object, a transparent glass vial containing a dark violet fluid that shimmered as if it had its own soul. I ran toward her, heart pounding like it would explode. "What is that?" Zheraya didn't turn around. Her voice drifted out, thin as smoke, but heavy as stone. "It's what's left of my bloodline, the origin strand, the final genetic code of the Elythar." I frowned. "What are you gonna do?" She stood up slowly. Her black-purple hair flowed lightly in the wind, no longer glowing like before. Her eyeless gaze locked onto mine. This time, her silver glow held no cold edge, only a pain too heavy to name. She didn't flinch, didn't retreat. It felt like she was preparing to surrender. "I know you're in love with me," she said. "And I don't want to leave you either." A chill ran down my spine. I swallowed hard. "Then don't." She shook her head. "It's not that simple. If I survive, an entire civilization will come hunting to tear you apart." I stepped back half a pace. "Why? What do I have to do with them?" She raised her hand, brushing her fingers gently against my cheek. "Because you're the first, and likely the last, who's biologically compatible with us. I've already passed the reproductive enzyme markers into your blood. I've marked you." It felt like I'd been slapped. My blood began to boil, not with anger but fear. Something foreign was inside me, something I couldn't control. I whispered, shaky with doubt, "What am I to you? A breeding module? A walking gene container?" Zheraya didn't react. She didn't get angry. She just stood there, like someone confessing a sin they wished they never committed. "You're a choice. I could have done this in other ways. But I didn't force you. You stayed. You touched me not out of duty. And that is what scares me most. Fear. A word that should never exist in the vocabulary of a being like her. A bioengineered warrior bred from two ancient bloodlines. The last of her kind. But she was afraid. For the first time in her life she had fallen in love. And love always carries the fear of loss. I sat down beside her. The wind slammed against us, scattering ion dust through the air like ghostly smoke. I looked down into the abyss, where the violet darkness flowed gently, like the breath of some ancient entity sleeping beneath the ground. I spoke slowly, each word slicing through the cold. I used to think love was a human thing, a pretty concept to rationalize desire. But with you, it's the opposite. Desire came from your genes, but emotion that was born from freedom. Zheraya said nothing. She simply placed the vial in my hand. It was weightless, but carried the gravity of an entire dying species. "This is the only hope to restore my kind. If I die," she said. "I gave you everything I could. But if I'm captured, all I am will be broken down. I won't be me anymore. I'll be a test sample. I gripped the vial. My hands were shaking, but I said nothing, because some moments don't need words. What we had shared, every touch, every breath, was enough to make this silence a vow. That night, we held each other again. No more desperate heat like those first nights. No longer just two bodies trying to release pressure, but two souls trying to preserve the seconds left. As if dawn would take everything away. And then a sound. Ping. A small sound. Sharp. Precise. But in that dead silence, it rang out like a sentence. I bolted upright, heart racing. The emergency beacon on my ship had activated, not a distress signal, a response. Someone was coming. Zheraya heard it too. She turned to me. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes, those galaxies she once carried, were now filled with panic. Not rescue, I said. She nodded. Not by accident. They know I'm alive. They know you're compatible. I fought down the rising terror and checked the coordinates. The signal came from the outer rim of the Genetica network, a name I'd seen in classified reports, a radical genetic research organization, once responsible for purging hybrid species across sectors in the name of biological purity. And now, they'd found her. Zheraya clutched my hand. Her palm was still hot, not from hormones, but from surging bioadrenaline. If they find me alive, you'll never leave this planet. And me, I'll be cloned, dissected, every gene, every memory, turned into product. I squeezed her hand back. This time, I was the one leading. We won't let that happen. She looked at me, not like someone needing protection, but like the last queen of her kind, about to choose whether to die for love or live to watch her lover be destroyed. The signal from the Genetica Union vessel grew clearer by the minute. No longer just static interference on the nav map. It was now a precise set of coordinates, closing in on an optimal descent arc, like an arrow aimed directly at the heart of Elythar 3. We had 5 solar hours left. 5 hours to choose between escape, resistance, or surrender. I swept through my ship's biometric systems. The enzyme scanner hadn't been triggered yet. The biosensors still flickered sporadically, just enough to avoid short-range radar. But I knew, if we stayed, even a strong gust of wind carrying residual pheromones in the air would expose Zheraya. Her blood was too different, too radiant, in a world built upon genetic purity. And I, the only one who had ever merged with her bloodline, had now become a marked target. Zheraya sat silently against the stone wall, no longer glowing. She said nothing, didn't tremble, showed no emotion, but her silence weighed heavier than a meteor hurtling toward the surface. Her biological cycle had ended. The enzyme production had stabilized, and yet somehow she looked more beautiful than ever. Not in the way her body appeared, but in the quiet dignity of letting go. "I can hide you inside the engineering compartment," I said, voice low and tight from too many thoughts pressing inward. "You're smaller than average. You could curl up, shielded with insulation. When Genetica arrives, I'll say I'm the only one who survived." She shook her head gently without hesitation. "They won't believe it, and if they find me, they'll process you as genetically infected. You'll no longer be human. You'll become a variant, a biological asset." I grasped her hand, tightening my hold as if I could keep her from disappearing just by not letting go. "Then we leave together. I'll abandon the Union. I can erase my records, live off-grid. There are unregistered planets, uncharted belts. We could disappear." She pressed a finger to my lips. Just that light touch was enough to silence every desperate plan. Her eyes didn't show resistance, only the pain of someone who already knew the ending. "I once believed I existed to preserve my species," she whispered. "But now I understand that even at the edge of extinction, a being can still be loved, and sometimes love is enough." We kissed one last time, slowly, deeply. Not in lust, but in an effort to encode every emotional molecule into each other. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a ritual, a final merging of two souls returning to where they'd always belonged, each other's hearts. Zheraya placed her hand on her abdomen. It trembled faintly. If you go and I stay, maybe a part of you stays with me. I couldn't speak. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing my heart with an iron fist. You? She stopped me. I'm not certain, but maybe. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I knew if I cried now, I'd never find the strength to walk away. When the Genetica vessel landed on Elythar, I stood alone on a dune. Suit across my shoulders, old ID tag half broken on my chest. The wind lashed my face, dried my eyes. The ship opened. A team disembarked. Not medics, not rescuers, but armed geneticists in silver semi-organic armor. I am Lieutenant Terran Wolf, Code 7 Kappa, astronaut lost in the Echo 6 incident. I survived by landing in an off-course escape pod. They asked nothing about anyone else. No mention of her. They scanned my blood, checked hormones, measured enzyme levels, but I had already taken the bioscrambler Zheraya created. There was nothing in my blood now but human DNA, at least on the surface. They brought me aboard. As the ship lifted off from Elythar 3, I didn't look back, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I did, my heart would fall to that planet and never return. I gripped one thing in my hand, the small vial of glowing violet she had given me. Inside was the last genetic key of a dying species, the echo of a life nearly erased, and the silent heart of a love that had never been allowed to exist, on a world with 2 violet moons. Months later, at a nameless transit station on the edge of the Eta Crix's system, where only illegal freighters, doctored star maps, and those beyond law were allowed, a small unmarked ship slipped away from a black market dock. Its hull scorched, unmarked, and silent. The pilot? A man whose eyes had once seen the galaxy burn from greed. In the co-pilot seat, inside a triple-layered gel incubator, was an egg. Its pulse was faint, but undeniably alive. A new life. Not entirely human, but carrying human DNA, and a chance, however small, to exist, to be free. The final line in the hidden flight log read, "We were compatible not because of our bodies, but because our hearts found each other, in the final mating season of life."